welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I will show you how to make the Snow Speckled Hat. This is a wonderful first hat project showing you how to knit in the round using circular needles, how to use double pointed needles when you get to the crown of the hat, but also how to do stranding to make the beautiful speckles on the hat itself. When I talk about stranding, I'm talking about carrying the color across the hat as you go from one stitch, skip 4 stitches, and work it into the next stitch. This is a form of color stranding. It's really not that difficult, and I'm excited to show you how. This is a free pattern available over on redheart.com. If you click on the link right down there in the video description box below, it will take you to this free pattern. While you're down there, please don't forget to smash that like button, as my kids say. Go ahead, grab your pattern and your materials, join me back here, and we will get started learning how to do the Longtail Cast On and get you going on these circular needles. For the Longtail Cast On, you want to measure off about 3 times the total circumference of the hat size you're making. So I'm going to be casting on 80 stitches, and that means it's 20 inches around. So I'm going to say that's about 20 inches, and I want about 3 times that amount for my tail. And I'm going to just give myself a little bit of cushion and add just a little bit more. It's at this point right here that I will be placing my Slipknot. See all of this extra yarn? That will be the tail of my Longtail Cast On. Let's see, for a Slipknot, you place the working yarn in the palm of your hand, and your tail, wrap it around your middle finger and forefinger. And when you come back up, cross over. After you cross over, turn your hand, go underneath the front loop and grab the back loop and off. You've just now created a slip knot. We will place that slip knot onto our needle and then tighten up the legs of it, so that way it's a little bit tighter around our needle. This counts as 1 stitch. We want to put the tail on the left-hand side of the needle and the working yarn towards the right-hand side of the needle, and I'm holding the needle in my right hand. I will now take my thumb, go underneath the tail, take my finger, and go underneath the working yarn. I want these 2 yarns to be somewhat snug around my finger and my thumb, so I am going to grab the ends of those 2 yarns and hold them in the palm of my hand. You can see here I have what would be, similar to a slingshot, and this is where we will begin our Longtail Cast On. I take my needle, and starting at the palm of my thumb, right down here, I will go up my thumb and grab that yarn. Now I'll swing around, and starting at the tip of my finger, I'll go down my finger and grab that yarn. You can see I have like a window right there. See where I put my thumb through that little window? What I want to do is I want to swing my needle through this window. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to swing it through that window, and then I'll let that yarn fall off of my thumb. And when I do that, I'll give a pull on the bottom part, and that tightens up the stitch. I want to make sure I don't make it too tight. I want it to still be able to move on my needle. Okay, once I do that, I readjust, get back in that slingshot position, and I start at the bottom of my thumb, move up my thumb, tip of my finger, go down my finger. There's my window. I'm going to swing through my window and then let the yarn go off of my thumb and pull. As you start to get a rhythm with this, you could actually rock your fingers. Can you see that? So I'm rocking my fingers and getting them in position to work these stitches around the needle. You want to get a total of 80 stitches or 90 stitches on your needle with this method. Again, I really prefer the Longtail Cast On because I think it has a really nice little stretch to it, allowing it to fit comfortably on your head, the brim to fit comfortably on your head. I also think it has a really nice edge to it, And when we go to join in the round, it's going to be really easy to make sure that our stitches are not twisted because we have a nice little edge already created, and we'll be able to tell if it's twisted around our needle incorrectly. Now I've done several stitches here that I've cast on, and I would continue on until I got the number I wanted. But you can already begin to see we have this really nice edge right there that's getting created on our needle. As you carry on and the stitches become bigger than this part of the needle, you just slide them down and these stitches will just gradually rest onto that cord. Now, I've already cast on 80 stitches on a different needle with a different color yarn. I want to show you what it looks like so that way you can see where you need to join to work in the round. When you cast on all your stitches, the first thing you want to do is make sure they are all laying on your needle correctly and not twisted around the needle before you join. The best course of action is to lay your needles down just like so. And if you've done the Longtail Cast On, you have this really nice edge on your work. You want to make sure that really nice edge is on the inside of your needles. Make sure that one bit is not like that, okay, where it just twists around your needle, because it's not going to work out correctly. You want to make sure that everything is laid nice and straight, just like so. Once you've done that, you will pick up your needles and treat each one as if they are individual needles, because they are. And this stitch right here, that's our slip knot. That's our slip knot that we created to begin with. And we are going to start off by knitting into that particular slip knot. Now you do want to make sure you do not accidentally start working with your tail. So at this point, if you have extra tail, go ahead and cut it off, leaving 4 to 6 inches that you can weave in later, and just get rid of your tail, your extra. Now you won't work with your tail. You want to make sure you have your yarn ready to go, and we're going to start knitting, but we're forgetting one little bit. We want to make sure we know where the start of this round is, so we're going to add a stitch marker. I'm going to add one of the pretty ones I've made, and if you want to know how to make these, there's an entire video for you to watch right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I'll make sure I put a link to it right up there in that little I button. So I've added my stitch marker and I'm ready to get started. All I'm going to do is take the needle that's in my right hand, go into that stitch. You see that? I'm just into the stitch. I will now yarn over my right hand needle just like I always do, and then I will pop out of that stitch and off. So I just knit that stitch. At this point, I want to make sure I give this yarn a nice tug so that way the stitch right here is nice and snug right up to that one. And this is a knit 2 purl 2 pattern we're going to be doing, so the next stitch is also a knit. So I'm going to go into the next stitch, yarn over, come out and off. Now I need to purl 2 stitches. So I will bring my yarn forward, go into the next stitch, yarn around my right hand needle, come out that stitch and off. Now here's a little tip. It's really common when you're doing knit 2 purl 2 ribbing that the stitch going from the knit to the purl can become kind of loosey-goosey. So here's one way you can try and combat that. After you complete your first purl, take a second, move your yarn back to the back and give it a good tug. Then bring it back forward and purl the next stitch. Okay? We'll bring our yarn to the back so that we can knit the next stitch, and you will knit the next stitch and knit the following stitch. Once again, bring my yarn forward, go into the stitch, yarn over, come out the stitch and off, and I can tell that's already just a little bit loose. It's the nature of the purl stitch. But if you bring it to the back and just give it a little tug, it cinches up that little bit of slack. Just remember to bring your yarn back to the front so that you can purl that next stitch again. Bring your yarn back to the back and it's time to knit. You will do this all the way around your needle until you get to the end. I'm going to switch hands this time so that way those of you who are continental knitters can see how it's done with the yarn in your left hand. So I just knit 2 stitches, and if you're lost on where you left off, remember when you pick up your needles, your yarn is always coming off the needle in your right hand. And then look at the stitches you just completed. I don't see 2 purl bumps right there, but I see 2 purl bumps on the ones next to it. That lets me know that I just finished 2 knits and I'm ready to do 2 purls. So I bring my yarn between the needles, go into the stitch, yarn over, out, and off. And yes, continental knitters, you too will want to do this little extra tug. Bring your yarn to the back, just give it a little tug. You can see right there, it just tightens up. Bring your yarn back to the front and purl your next stitch. Bring your yarn to the back, naturally kind of pull it, and then you will knit 2 stitches. Knit 1, knit 2. A little fuzz right there. And then I move to the forward, to the front, and I will purl 1, give it a little tug, and then purl 2. As you're going along, you'll notice that the stitches start to bunch up a little bit on your needle. You'll just push them around, and it's okay if it gets a little bit of slack there. It's totally fine. Don't stress out. You're not doing anything wrong. It's okay. If it becomes bigger later on and it's a little bit unsightly, we'll be able to close that up with our tail. It won't be a problem. I'm going to keep going here with the yarn in my left hand, and I just knit 2, and now I'm going to purl 2. So purl 1 and purl 2. You'll notice that it's sort of a habit for me now to do that extra little bit of the tug after I go from a knit to a purl. It's just one of those things. It just tightens up that stitch and it makes it look so much more uniform to the rest of the ribbing. I am going to get all the way around this round to the end so that way I can show you how you transition from one round to the next. Okay, so let's get around this entire round. I'm getting to the end here and I'm on my last 2 purls. So I just finished my last purl. I can give my tail a little tug, that'll help me, and my yarn's back and back. Now I can already see that all of my beginning cast-ons are still on the inside, right? Nothing's twisted, nothing's abnormal. I'm not going to come out with some weird shaped hat. So that's really great. I'm also to my marker. So all this means is that I have finished 1 round, which is great. I slip my marker off my left hand needle, place it on my right hand needle, and I would just carry on. Now you'll notice that here, even I have a little bit of slack there, and I'm not going to be worried about it because this tail here can act as a seam right there, just a little bit of tacking that together, and it's never going to show. So what I can do now is continue in the round working my knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and when I go now I really don't have to think too much about what stitch I'm on because I can look at the stitches as they rest on my left hand needle, and whatever I'm looking at, that's what I will do. Here's an example. I'm looking at a purl stitch, so I know I'm going to purl it. I'm looking at a purl stitch. I know I'm going to purl it. I'm looking at a knit stitch. Can you see that V right there? So I'm going to go ahead and knit it. I'm looking at a knit stitch. I'll go ahead and knit it. I'm looking at a purl. See that purl bump? I'll go ahead and purl. Switch my yarn into my other hand. For those of you who want to see it over here, I'm going to make sure I'm maneuvering my yarn around my needle. Go into the knit and I knit. Go into the knit and I knit. Bring my yarn between my needles, go into the purl, and I purl. I'm going to tighten that up just so slightly. Make sure I bring my yarn back, and then I purl. Bring my yarn back to the back, and I knit. Back to the back, and I knit. Bring my yarn forward, and I purl. Give it just a little snug tug, tighten it up, and I purl again. Back to the back, I'm looking at knits, and I knit. You continue on working in the knit 2, purl 2 pattern until the brim of your hat measures 1.5 inches. Let me show you what that looks like on the actual sample. Let's bring in the hat. As I set down the actual sample, you can see right here, this is the knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And so the knits are stacked on knits and the purls are stacked on purls. You will have a really nice ribbing happening as you are working around, and it's going to be exciting. Once the ribbing is complete, we will switch colors to our solid color and we will knit 3 rounds. Go ahead and finish your ribbing. Join me back here. I'll show you how to switch colors. It's so easy, it's ridiculous. Then we'll knit 3 rounds and we'll jump into the stranded bit of our knitting. I finished my ribbing and it's time for me to change colors and work 3 rounds in color B. Let me show you how I change colors. Now, one of the first rules is knitting is that you never want to put a knot in your knitting. So that is exactly what I'm going to have you do here to begin with. I'm literally taking my new color, which is the blue, and I am just tying it directly onto the red. I'm just tying it on there and then I'm sliding it right up to my work. Can you see that? So now I have the tail of the red and the tail of the blue just hanging out there. What this does, it makes it so that the blue is a little bit more secure than if it were just hanging out and dancing around. That's no fun, and I don't like to do it that way. So I like to just tie it right there onto the old color, and then I will begin knitting with the new color. When I go to weave in my ends, I will untie that knot and just weave them in, but it helps hold everything in place here at the start. Once you've done that, I've gone ahead, I've moved my stitch marker over, and it's time for me to just start knitting. So for 3 rounds, I am going to simply knit all of the stitches. So I go in, around, out, off, and even when it comes to the purl, I simply knit. And I will do this all the way around for 3 rounds. Once I finish with the 3rd round, I begin round 4, and that's when I introduce the snow speckles. So let me get these 3 rounds complete. As I'm knitting around on this, it occurred to me that I should probably tell you that you need to make sure you are knitting your work with the right side of the fabric pointed out towards you. If you find that you're knitting along and your stitches look like this and you're knitting with this work over here towards you, that is going to make it so that way your work is inside out. You want to make sure that the fabric, as you're looking at the stitches here, see how my knits are starting to form right there? I want to make sure that as I'm knitting, it's essentially like I'm knitting like this, okay? I'm knitting with this edge of my needle pointed out here towards me. So if I were to pick it up and, have it just face just like this, I am knitting just like so. I am not knitting away from me like this. This is really important when we get to the crown shaping, so I want to make sure you aren't accidentally knitting incorrectly, knitting inside out. So you've got to make sure that the body of your work is closest towards you, and then all of the stitches as you're knitting them are away from you. Okay, so I'm just going to point that out here real quick as I finish up with my 2nd round here in a second and do one more round. Okay, I just finished my third round, and you can tell you have finished 3 rounds by counting your new color. So I have one V right there, the second V is there, and the third V as far as my row or my round is sitting on my needle. So that's one way you can go back and count how many rounds you've completed. It's time for me to work with the next set of instructions, which is where I incorporate my next color every 5th stitch. And what that will do is it will look like it's a speckled snowflake. Now, one thing we will do is we will be floating that color from that stitch across 4 stitches and then put it into the next stitch. And when we do that, we need to make sure that we are not pulling that float tight. Otherwise, our hat will be too small for us to wear. It will not give any or have any stretch with it, and you won't be able to fit it over your head. So it's really important that we have really nice even floats, but they also have a little bit of slack to them, so that way we have some movement as the hat is on your head. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. I will go ahead and I am going to join my color C just like I did with my color B before. Okay, so here's my color C. I'm going to tie it onto this one, but because I'm still using color B, I'm not cutting my color B. This is just going to give my color C a place to hang on to. Okay, so we're just going to let that hang out there. Now I will show you how to Fair Isle with your yarn in one hand to begin with, and then I'm going to show you how I Fair Isle with my yarn in 2 hands, okay, or stranded knitting. I guess that's a better way to say it. The first set of the instructions say to go ahead and knit 4 stitches with color B. So I've knit 4 stitches with my color B. Now I will drop color B, grab color C. So color C is going over top of color B, you see that? And I will go ahead and knit the next stitch with my color C. Now, you see this strand right there across those 4 stitches? That is the strand I was just talking about. So you need to make sure that it has a little bit of slack. So one way to do that, I've had my friends teach me this when I first started to do stranding, is if you put your finger right there behind those 4 stitches and then let the yarn drape across your finger as you go to knit that next stitch, that forces that yarn to have that little bit of slack that you want. That's a great technique, right? So then I just hold that stitch there, so that way when I go into the next stitch, I drop the white, I grab my blue, and blue goes over top of the white, so new over old, and I would carry on knitting 4 stitches with my blue. Now technically the blue has a little bit of slack too. See that? A little bit of a strand right there because it has to go behind that white. But because it's just 1 stitch, we don't have to worry about it nearly as much as when we do that one. So let's get through this a little bit. And yes, your yarn is going to get tangled a little bit. That's okay. You can untangle it as you go. There are my 4 stitches. Notice I have my yarn stitches spaced out a little bit. I'll put my finger right back there towards the behind those 4 stitches. New over old. And as I go into that next stitch, I make sure that my yarn goes over my finger right there as I knit that next stitch to give myself a little slack. Then I do new over old. So I get back to my color B. And I carry on knitting 4 stitches. Now, if you don't like switching the yarn in this method, meaning you drop one color for the next, you could also hold the yarn in 2 hands, so 1 color in each hand. The best way to do that is to put the color that you're going to use the most in your dominant hand. Now for me, my left hand is my dominant hand when I knit. So I would place the blue, because we do 4 stitches in blue, in my left hand. Then in my right hand, I would go ahead and place color C, or the white color, into my right hand and thread it ready to go. All I have to do now is, when it's time for me to knit this stitch, I have my yarn in my right hand, I simply come up, let me get into that stitch again, come up and I knit that stitch and off. I still have that strand there, so I want to make sure it's not getting too tight. And it's a little bit more difficult this way in, with the finger, but I could just stick my finger in after the fact or have my middle finger in there before I start to wrap. But then I'm ready, I'm already in position to go ahead and continue on knitting 4 stitches with my blue or my B color, get things spaced out nicely, and then knit 1 with my C color. Knit 4 stitches with B, and then I knit 1 stitch with C. Can you see how that's working there? And I have my nice floats all the way along. They're not too tight. I need to make sure they are not too tight. And I carry on. When you get to the end, your last stitch should be with your color C, and you will slip your marker over, whoops, and continue on with the pattern, which you will notice is just 3 more rounds of your color B. So all you'll do is drop your color C, just let it kind of hang out there. Don't cut it off because you don't want to have to cut it off and rejoin. You'll be able to float it up on the inside. And go ahead and carry on with your color B. And as you get to those color C stitches, treat them as a normal stitch. Just knit it with your color B. Okay, so I'm going to do this for 3 rounds, and then we will do the next round, which is round 8, which is virtually identical to the round we just completed. Only thing is we want our speckles to be offset, so we are going to offset them ever so slightly. So let me get through with the next 3 rounds, and I'll get you back here to show you how to offset these. All right, I'm on the last stitch of my 3rd round. Slip my marker, and I am going to begin round 8. So with color B, I go ahead and start off with a knit 2. Now I'm going to jump in with color C and do a knit 1. And when I do that, I'm bringing my color C up from the row below, right? Like 3 rows below. And when I give this a pull, I want to make sure I'm not pulling so tight that that stitch is disappearing. See how it disappears? You want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough slack to have that stitch remain and have the new stitch come up and be created right over there. Okay, you see how that stitch is still remaining down there, but I'm getting that there. I'm creating sort of a diagonal strand. Now I can continue on, and you can do whichever method you want. As I mentioned, I really like to hold my yarn with the colors one on each hand. I think it makes it a good time for you to practice holding your yarn this way, and it also allows you to have better control of the stranding in this method. So I highly recommend you try this. Once we do these initial first 3 stitches, the rest of the pattern all the way around until we get to the last 2 stitches is just like we did before. So we will knit 4 stitches with color B. Make sure those are spaced out ever so you don't want them scrunched up, otherwise your slack is going to be too squished in there, okay? And then we will knit 1 with color C. Then we'll knit 4 with color B, and then 1 with color C. Again, you want to make sure you always want to make sure you have enough slack there, okay? Don't just think to yourself, oh, I have plenty, and not check, because you will kick yourself in the end if the hat doesn't fit because your slack is just a little bit too snug, okay? And then wrap and go around. I think by this point you have got this, right? 3 and 4 and in, space those out, around and off. You can see I have a nice good slack there. So the inside of my work looks like that. It looks like it has some really great slack. And if I were to set this down and pull over the sample, you can also see the nice strands that were done by the designer, Erin Kate Archer. Okay, so you can see there's nice slack between one stitch to the next, so that way the hat fits comfortably, okay? You want to make sure you do that. You will continue on in this pattern until the body of your hat measures 6 inches from the cast on edge, ending on either a row 3 or a row 7. So you will end on a row 3 or a row 7. You will join me back here for some crown shaping. It's really easy. I'll get you started. We'll transfer those double pointed needles and get to the finish line of this really cute hat. It's time to shape the top of the hat, and it's really easy to do. We are simply going to alternate a decrease round and a knit round until we get down to 10 stitches. Let me get you started. To start off, we are no longer going to use our color B, so I went ahead and snipped my color B, leaving a 4 to 6 inch tail. My color C is still attached to that last little stitch I did there, and that's the color we're going to use for the crown of our hat. So I will simply carry on in my pattern here, and for me, I'm making the 80 stitch count around, if you remember. So I would jump automatically to round 1 of the both sizes section. And what that says is to knit 6 with my color C, okay? Again, I want to make sure when I come up here to knit it, I'm not pulling that one too tight down there so I don't lose it. And I will knit 6 stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I will knit 2 stitches together. I will go into this stitch first and then the stitch closest to the tip of my needle. You see that? So knitting 2 together, I'm literally going to put my needle through both of those stitches at the same time, and then I simply knit them. And that decreases 1 stitch. Now I will repeat that again. So I will knit 6 stitches, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then knit 2 together. I will repeat this all the way around till I get to the end of the round, and then I will knit a round. On the following knit round, I am also going to transfer to double pointed needles because my stitches are going to be getting fewer and fewer, and it's too hard to keep them on the circular needle. So I need to transfer them to a double point. So let me get to the end of this round, and then I'm going to show you how to transfer to double points. I'm to my last knit 2 together right there, and I'm to the end of my round, okay? So when I transfer to double points, I will not need my stitch marker anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. I now have 70 stitches around my circular needle, and I want to distribute those evenly around either 3 needles or 4 needles. Personally, I prefer to work with 4 needles and have a 5th needle be the needle I'm working onto, so that's what I'm going to do. If I take 70 and divide by 4, that gives me 17.5. Well, obviously I can't use half a stitch, so I'm just going to make it so that on one needle I'll put 17, on the next I'll put 18. Then I'll put 17 on the 3rd needle and 18 on the 4th. You ready? Here's how we'll do this. I'm going to grab my needle and I will ignore the needle that I was using in my right hand. I'm just going to kind of pull it up and out of the way. And I will carry on knitting, only this time I'm going to knit directly onto my double pointed needle. And this round is not a shaping round, it's simply just a knit round. So I'm going to start off. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I have 17 on that one needle. I'll grab another needle, and when I rotate and start knitting my next 18 stitches onto this needle, this is very important. Are you ready? When I knit the first stitch, just like we did when we were doing the knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, we really want to give that yarn a nice tug. So that way this stitch right here Now that we have those 17 stitches on one needle, we will grab our next needle and put 18 on that one. But it's really important you follow my instructions here, otherwise you'll get a ladder at the top of your hat. Are you ready? In order for the stitches to go from this needle to this needle, we'll simply knit them. But to make sure that our first stitch we knit is nice and snug next to this one, we want to make sure we wiggle and tug our yarn nice and tight, okay? So I'm going to go into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then I am going to simply pull that yarn. See how I'm pulling the yarn? It tightens everything up. Now this needle is nice and snug up to that needle, and it looks like the transition from this stitch to that stitch is almost seamless. Once I've done that, I need to remember to do that on the next stitch also, because once I do it to the first one, that's great, but I have to do it to the next one so that it holds that first one. It needs a partner on either side to hold it in place. Now I can knit on just like normal, so I will just continue on and get my 18 stitches on here. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and there's my 18. And I just push them up and they won't fall off. They're just going to sit there. I rotate my needle. I come over here, I grab my next needle, and I repeat the process. When I go into this stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I want to make sure, see how there's a lot of slack right there? Can you see all that slack? I want that to be tightened up, and I simply do that by pulling on my yarn. See how that tightens that up real nice and neat? Now I need to make sure the partner next to it holds it tight also. So I will knit that one nice and snug. See how tight that is? I carry on, and I'm going to put 17 on this needle. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And I just scoot those up. Last needle, I'll do the same thing. Rotate around, and these are the final stitches. When I get done with these stitches, my circular needle will be free. So I'll go in, yarn over, pull up a loop and off, and then give that a nice tug. It tightens everything up. Make sure I do that again on the second one. Everything's tight. Look, I can even let go. It doesn't fall out. And I carry on. I'll just continue knitting all the way down this row. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. So my circular needle is free. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And all of my stitches are now on double points. Now, there's nothing to be scared about at this point, because all this means is our circular needle, if I were to set it directly on top of this, I want you to look at that. This is really similar to what we were doing. Our stitches are on here, and our stitches, instead of being on the cord, they're on this needle. Instead of being on the cord, they're on this needle. And then this needle, if I were to kind of catch that up, these stitches would be on the cord. And this 5th needle here is the one I'm going to knit onto, okay? So we're still knitting in the rounds. We'll go from this needle to this needle to this needle to this needle, but we're doing it in sections now. We have break points in our circular knitting. And in order to make those break points look seamless, we have to make sure we always do those extra little tugs on those first 2 stitches that you do on each needle. If you always do that, you won't get what are called ladders or really loosey-goosey stitches. So I just did my entire knit round, which means I'm on round 3, which means I would knit 5 and then knit 2 together. What you're going to notice is every time you get back to a decrease round, you're going to knit one less stitch as you did the round before. So for example, the round before we knit 6 and then knit 2 together. This round we'll knit 5 and then knit 2 together. Then we'll knit around, then we'll knit 4 and knit 2 together, so on and so forth until we get down to 10 stitches. So I will pick up my work, make sure my work is facing me just like we did all the time we were knitting this hat, and I will continue on and begin working this decrease. So I knit the first one, give it a good tug, knit the second one, and give it a good tug to hold it in place. Now, one thing you guys might be thinking is, Marley, how am I going to know that this is the start of my round, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the tail of my color B that I used, and I am literally just going to thread it through those stitches and have it go to the front right there. And when I get back around here, that tail is going to be in that place, and it's going to show me that that's the start of my round. So I've knit 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I simply knit 2 together. 1, let's get this yarn out here a little bit for me. 2, 3, 4, 5, and knit 2 together. Now here's something interesting I want you guys to see that's going on. I only have 3 stitches left on this needle, and the stitches I need to finish off are going to be over there. Totally fine. I will knit 1, 2, 3. Here's my spare needle now, nothing's on it. Transfer that over, scooch my stitches a little, rotate clockwise, put these in play. Now I have to knit 2 more, remember, because I did a decrease and I knit 3. When I knit my first one, I make sure I give it a nice tug. Knit my second one, give it a nice tug. So there's 4, 5, and it's time to knit 2 together. Okay, and then I would knit 5. If you come to, hold on, 1, 2, knit 2 together, 2, 3, 5. If you come to a point where maybe the 2 stitches you need to knit together, one is on one needle and the other is on another needle, you have to make a decision. Just transfer over one of those stitches, either that stitch over here or this stitch over there, so that way you can knit them together. It's pretty obvious. All just do is just make sure that the 2 stitches are together, so that way you can knit them together and it'll all work out okay. So I'm going to continue on all the way around this round, and I'm going to get to the end so you can see how I know where I'm at the end of my work, okay? I'm at the end of my round. I just finished my knit 2 together, and I know I'm at the end of the round because you can see right here, here's my string just kind of hanging out there. It's waiting for me, and it's a clue that I'm at the end of my round. You continue on working this regular round of knits after the decrease round. Now that will happen continuously until you get to round 8, when the designer has it to where you no longer have a regular round of knits. You do decreases on top of decreases. So for right now, you will do decreases, a decrease round, and then just a regular knit round, okay? So just to remind you, I am on round 4 right now. On round 5, I will knit 4 and then knit 2 together all the way around, and that will be followed up with a knit round. I'm almost to the end of this round here. Let me get there and I will show you the knit 4 and then knit 2 together, just so you can see how fast this goes. One of the things that I find really exciting when I work on hats is that when I get to the crown, it goes really quickly because I'm decreasing stitches. So I have fewer stitches to work all the way around. So I tend to go really fast, which is really nice by the time you get to the top of the hat. So I'm at the end of my round, and I know because there's my string just kind of poking out for me. I turn my work and I will continue on. This time I will knit 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knit 2 together. Let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knit 2 together. 1, 2, 3. Don't worry, I can come over here and get the 4th. And then here's my 4. I'm going to give it a nice tug. And then my knit 2 together and give that a nice tug because that's my second stitch. I carry on. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then knit 2 together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knit 2 together. 4, and then knit 2 together. I'm at the end of the round, and I can tell that because here's my string. See how convenient that is? I don't have to worry about a stitch marker falling off or anything else. Now, round 6 is a simple knit round, and then 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all decrease rounds, which you have been doing. Obviously, you can see how that is. So I'm going to go ahead and get through, and I'm going to get to round 10, and I'll show you how to finish up with round 10 and end the top of your hat. Okay, I'm on the final round of the top of my crown, and it's time for me to knit 2 together all the way around. It is as easy as that sounds. I'm simply going to knit 2 together all the way around this hat. So as I get to each stitch, I just knit 2 together, and I will be left with 10 stitches by the end of this. So let's see here. Once I get those 10 stitches, I am going to cut my yarn and thread them through all the live stitches and pull them like a drawstring to close the top of the hat. Now I have a certain way that I like to thread my needle through all the live stitches to make the top of the hat a really pretty finish, and I'm going to share that with you. Most patterns that I come across tell you to thread your yarn through the live stitches as if to purl, but I actually like to go into each one as if to knit, and I think it just looks so much better. So here I am, the last 2 stitches I just finished, and I know I'm at the end of the round. Here's my yarn tail we've been looking at. Now for this one, I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a little bit extra because I want to make sure I can thread it through those and then weave it to the inside of my hat. So I've cut my tail, and I'm going to thread it onto my bent tip tapestry needle and simply just thread it right on there like so. And starting in the next stitch I would have been working to if I continued on working with my double pointed needles, I'm going to go in as if to knit and simply slip it off. Go in as if to knit and slip it off. Go in as if to knit and slip it off. Now I'll pull that needle through all those stitches, rotate, and do that again. Go in as if to knit and slip it off. Go in as if to knit and slip it off. Give that a good pull. Go in as if to knit, slip it off, as if to knit, as if to knit. Give it a good pull. And the last one, as if to knit, as if to knit, and then I give this a pull. Now, here's the top of my hat right now. It looks like this. Now, I think this is so magical. You ready? Let's watch this together. I'm going to pull on this string, and when I do, the top of the hat comes together like a really pretty flower. I'm going to take my tail, thread it through these stitches, really give it a good pull. My needle came off, forgive me. Just thread it right back on the needle. Thread your tail right back on the needle if it happens. And I can pop this needle right down there, down the center, the top of my hat, to pull that tail through. And look at that. Look at the top of my hat. Look how pretty that little finish is right there. Now, whether I decide to put a pom-pom on or not, that is a beautiful top of the hat. On the inside of the hat, you can see, if I flip it inside out, I have my beautiful floats. None of them are too loose or too tight. And right at the top here, I will secure my tail simply by weaving it closed through these live stitches. I'm just going to go back and forth through these stitches, making sure my needle doesn't go through to the opposite side. And I want to make sure that I am keeping this top of the hat nice and secure and closed. So I want to make sure it doesn't pop open on me. So it's really important that you really secure this nice and tight. And you do not want to add a knot because it's at the top of your head, right? You don't want a knot on the top of your head. It's going to bug you very much. So I have just snipped it all around there. My finger's on the opposite side of the hat right now just to make sure nothing's popping through. If this were me, I would feel like this is nice and secure at this point. So I'm going to just pop this through one more, and then I would give that a snip. Set this aside. And then you can do the same thing with your tail, the blue tail. So here's my blue tail. Remember, we were using it as a stitch marker. You can tell that's the start of my round the whole time, because see where my yarn kind of floats up from every other row for when I needed to use the white again. And when I weave in this tail, this end, what I'm going to do is I am going to duplicate the path of the blue stitch as it goes around that white. So here's what I will do. I will pop underneath this one and come up. And this one goes around this way, and then it goes underneath that one. This goes around this way, and it pops up that one. Goes around this way and goes through that one. So on and so forth. And this is just weaving in my tail, and I'm making sure that it doesn't interfere with the white. And it is almost as if we're duplicate stitching the tail here. Now when I get to this point, here's what I like to do. I like to take my tapestry needle and go through the actual fibers of one of those strands I just wove through, and I just kind of weave it back through as I'm working through the fibers. I have it just going right through the fiber itself, coming back just to try and lock it in place a little bit more, and go up one more time. And for me, if I were to call this my project, I would say that was complete. Nothing's pulling. It's nice and flush to the fabric. So I can go ahead and snip that nice and close, and it's going to be fine. The last thing to do would be to come down here and untie this knot. And then for this one, it's a little bit trickier to weave in because you don't want to interfere with these two colors on the opposite side. So you can still kind of follow the path along right here. But what I will do is I am going to do what's called burying my ends. So instead of weaving my ends in, I am going to bury them. So I'm going to undo that. See, remember I just tied that onto there. So here is the first stitch where I used my color C, my white. And so this here is my tail. And what I will do is I'm going to thread my tail with my tapestry needle, and I am simply going to take my yarn and working through the strands of the purl bumps right here. I'm working through the actual strands just like before. Okay, it's easier if you have a sharper needle, but I'm gonna just stick with the tapestry needle because that's what the pattern calls for. You just thread through like I'm actually splitting the yarn. Okay, I'm gonna go down a couple of them, and I have my finger on the opposite side of the hat, making sure my needle isn't popping through. And then I'm going to thread this down this way, ever so slightly, making sure I don't pull too much there. And then when I come back, I'm going to grab down here just a little bit further so that I have a turning point. See if I can get in there just a little bit for you. Ah, it's giving me a little trouble, of course. And then when I come back, not only am I going to go through the blue that I've already split, but I'm going to go through the white that I just brought through. So that way I can lock it in just a little bit more. This is very similar to like a Russian join. And it's just a way to kind of lock in your stitches. It's called burying your stitches, burying your ends. It's called burying your ends, not your stitches. And then when I pull it back, give that a nice, gentle tug. Everything's locked in place. If I flip this around, nothing is showing over there. And I've gone ahead and I've buried that in to where it's not going to show. It's locked in place. I don't have a knot. I'm not worried about that coming undone. Down here, I will do exactly what I did before. I want to make sure I undo that blue knot. Remember, we have that blue knot there. You don't want a knot on your head, remember. We don't put knots in our knitting except when Marley says you should, just to change colors. It's not that you should. It's just, I find it easier. I like the stability it gives me with the yarn change. This is tedious sometimes though, undoing it, but it comes undone. Comes undone eventually. Here we go. Finishing my whole hat here. Look at this. And there we are. And then just like we did at the top, we are going to have this red follow the path of the red stitches just like before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop down here, and it came up here. Okay. Get this blue out of the way. And then where'd we go? Right over here. And then this one's interesting because it's a purl, so it goes through those two. And then it comes up and comes down. And this one goes through that one and that one. You're just literally just following the path. And then I will go ahead and split this yarn, very similar to what we just did, just to lock it in place, because I don't want it to go anywhere. I really like to split the yarn whenever I can, especially if I'm using a wool. Splitting the yarn really allows the wool to grab onto itself and make it secure. So there we are. Give it a nice pull. And I feel like that's nice and secure. That's not going to come undone. Give that a snip. And do the last one, the last two here. I'm going to go ahead and do them. I might as well. I'm already showing you how to do them. And there you have it. I'm going to turn this back around. You have a lovely snow speckled hat. It is super cute, so adorable, and the way the finishing is up top here, you actually don't need a pom-pom if you don't want one because it's so simply beautiful. If you want to learn to make a pom-pom though, I'm going to put a link to it right there in that little I button, and it'll take you to the video to show you how to make the perfect pom-pom, which you can see added to the sample right here. Here's a beautiful pom-pom, and here is the piece made up in Red Heart Super Saver, and this piece here is made up in a brand new yarn coming to Red Heart at the end of the month. I'll tell you more about it in the video description box below, so make sure you don't miss out on that. I hope you've enjoyed this adventure into maybe it's your first hat in the rounds with some stranded knitting and circular needles and double points. There's a lot of stuff that you've learned by making this hat, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been fun teaching you. Make sure you come back here for more videos to make you a better knitter or crocheter. Simply hit subscribe, and don't forget to click that little bell button so you're notified when I have a new video released. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and you are watching the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Bye. Hey, don't leave yet. I'm sure there are other videos here that you will enjoy. Go ahead and check out some of my knitting and crochet videos, as well as some of my crafting videos. You will love them, I promise. If you hit subscribe, you'll be up to date whenever there's a new video released. And as my kids say, don't forget to smash that like button. Bye. Learn on YouTube with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.